On the words. I can never be a comedian.
Oh, I love it.
Good morning, Daily Huddlers. I'm so happy to have you all here. And I'm going to course correct and break the rules on the Daily Huddle and tell my joke again without laughing. Did you know that there's a little known fact law in Hawaii that you are not allowed to have big, loud, ruckus laughter in Hawaii? They only tolerate aloha. Okay. I got it out this time.
Aloha. I didn't actually get it the first time.
Oh, that was perfect that I goofed the joke. I couldn't quit laughing because today we are talking about exactly what I just did. What happens when you completely make a mess with your words? How do we course correct from there? I have got some personal experiences to share and some science and some facts. But first, I want to turn it over to my lovely co-host, Kathryn Sabol, to kick us off.
Thank you, Tara, for modeling what we're going to be talking about today.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Well, I think we can all relate to making a mess and having to clean it up at different times. Yeah, this reminded me of a while back when I was managing somebody, and this person, we were having trouble with his performance and had created a plan, like we were on track for it, but then I got a new manager. And the new manager came in and said, didn't like what he saw. And he said, okay, we're going to talk to this person and we're basically going to call him to task and make sure that he gets on track. And if he doesn't, we're going to let him go. And it was really, really direct. And my gut said, this doesn't feel right. We had a plan, things were working, they were moving, but I deferred because this person had authority over me and, it was my manager. I was like, oh, they must know better. And you can probably tell where this is headed. It went horribly wrong. It went sideways. It was, a terrible conversation. We ended up having to get involved with HR, and then we had to course correct because what happened was the manager actually had an ulterior motive. I didn't know that at the time, but really did want to get rid of the person, open up that role for somebody else. And so a lot of what came through in the conversation that we had felt backhanded, uncomfortable, awkward, not direct, all of that. So
coming from you mean?
No, just the conversation with the manager. I was there and part of it, but the whole vibe of it was sort of like we were targeting this person, when there's an underlying something that people aren't saying, that's what happens. You feel it in the room. So anyway, then it came back to me because I was managing this person and I had to clean it up. Now, I can't clean up somebody else's mess, but what I recognized in that process is that I didn't trust my gut. And that's what landed us in the position that we were in. I knew that something didn't feel right. I wasn't quite sure what it was in the moment. And I could have prevented a lot of this from happening if I had trusted my gut and said, this doesn't feel right. Let's get clarity. Let's involve somebody else, or ask more direct questions. So I had to go back to this person and have a conversation and basically level set and say, to the best of my ability, this is what happened. Anyway, it was a very uncomfortable time. It was quite a mess. And I thought, let's talk about this. Let's talk about when you create a mess, either by doing something, directly or just not necessarily intentionally, or like this, where I didn't trust my gut and it landed me in a sticky situation where I was having to backtrack. I had to own accountability for my part in it. I had to get really vulnerable and yet still maintain a boundary. Yeah. So, and I know we all have situations like this. And the question is how do we clean it up? Because I can tell you, it's not easy sometimes, especially when there's nuances. In this case, there were things I couldn't say because, they're legal and all that stuff involved. So talk to us, Tara. What do you say about how do you clean up a mess?
Well, the number one thing that you said, the thing that points out, I think the thing that resonates with me first out of all that you said is accountability. Mm-hmm. There's kind of a movement out there, and I think it's a little bit more in the feminist world where women are telling each other to stop apologizing. And there's a place for that. I think there is a place for us to stop apologizing. For example, when we didn't do anything wrong, we have a tendency to say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I even hear it from Caroline. She says, I'm sorry a lot of times when I guess she learned it from me.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there is a time when we absolutely should apologize.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a genuine, sincere, succinct, accountable apology goes a long way.
Mm-hmm.
How did you handle this situation? I mean, you kind of generalize. I'd like to know the grit.
Well, I prepped and I planned for it a lot because there was something in me that felt really uncomfortable. And if I show up to a conversation and I'm not fully clear on what's going on, then it's going to come out sideways again. So I did a lot of work with myself to get clear about what do I feel uncomfortable about. There were some underlying issues with the person's behavior, so I had to address that directly. Then I pulled out what was my part, what was very clearly my part. And I said, we landed here because I allowed somebody else to come in and step in the middle of what we had already planned and arranged.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have the courage to stand up and say, no, that's not right. And to be honest, I sometimes tend towards the apologetic side. So the additional thing that I had to do was not make it all about that. That was really just a small part of it. So I had to own it, apologize for it, let it be the small part that it was, hear any feedback, and move on and stay grounded through the whole thing.
Do you think, I really want to explore before we move on the emotions around apology, because sometimes they do come over as genuine and sincere, and sometimes they do not. Do you think that your apology was well received? Did it help? Okay.
Well, I do, because what I was cleaning up in the room was a mess of things that nobody could tell what they were because they weren't being spoken to. They were, they were saying this thing, we're going to do this, but really he was trying to get rid of the person, right? So it's like, and so there's all this uncomfortable dynamic. But here, what you're asking reminds me. I met a Native American shaman many years ago and spent some time with him, and I'll never forget one of the things that he said. He said, "An apology, I'm sorry, is an excuse to do it again."
Ooh.
And I really thought about that. And it doesn't mean don't say sorry when you mean it. It doesn't mean that. It means, what if we replaced I'm sorry with I'm not going to do that again? For me, that changes the dynamic because it makes me have to get really clear on, do I mean that? Am I going to stick to my word? You're really big on sticking to your word. Do I mean I'm not going to do that again? In many cases, it really doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I don't think that I can. I'm not sure if I can, or yeah. So, I mean, how does it shift if we say, I'm not going to do that again, or I'm going to do my best not to do that again? It's my
Right.
intention not to do that again, you know? So my point is, I think a genuine apology can really be heard and received, especially if it has that energy behind it. Like, that was not right. I apologize, and I'm going to do better next time.
Yeah. That to me feels like the grandiose opposite of the good old, I'm sorry, but, or I'm sorry you feel that way.
I'm sorry you took it that way.
Yeah. And sometimes we have to apologize for something that we're not going to change, that we're sorry for this particular behavior. I'll tell you what it takes me back to is, this was years ago. I have always said to people, never say I'm sorry, but.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember a time when I said it to my youngest daughter. And I was preparing to leave to go to, ironically, Hawaii. But I was taking her sister and brother to investigate a brand new diet for Caroline's epilepsy. And we were leaving, and we were going to spend 3 weeks in Hawaii. So I have 3 children, for people who don't know. I was taking the oldest to help me, and then I was taking Caroline, the one with epilepsy, and the baby Holly was staying back with her dad for Christmas, the whole holiday with her dad and grandmother. And we were preparing for this trip, and it was going to be treacherous. We were trying to get Caroline off a lot of her medication. And I remember this so clearly. I was sitting out on my screened-in porch, and it was almost bedtime, and Holly came out. There were tears in her eyes. And she climbed up into the little porch swing beside me. And I'm like, what's wrong? And her little lips started quivering. And she said, do you have to go to Hawaii during Christmas? Why can't you go another time? Why Christmas? And Holly was about to turn 16 at the time. And there was nothing I could do about it. I mean, I had to go during that time because of work, because of Wilson's schedule. I mean, it just was when it had to be. And I said those terrible words, I'm sorry, but. I didn't try to talk her out of her feelings, but I did something else that I definitely do not recommend is I offered a freaking consolation prize. So in that moment, I said, I'm sorry, I have to go. I'm sorry, but you're going to have the best 16-year-old surprise you've ever dreamed of on your birthday, which was right before Christmas. Now, in that moment, I didn't know what that surprise was going to be. But I did keep my word and make sure that she had an amazing surprise on her 16th birthday. But sometimes I think we do tend to offer a consolation prize. And you know what I feel like looking back on it is I didn't really validate her hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was nothing I could really do about it. It
Mm-hmm.
was messed up. It was terrible that I was saying I'm leaving with your siblings for the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, it's that uncomfortable pause where the feelings land, and can we be with that? And quite often, I'll be honest with my children, I can't. I want to sweep that away. It's very difficult to be with that. And it's true with other people too, especially if I've hurt them or done something wrong. To sit in that discomfort where they're having a reaction to that is very uncomfortable for me. Yes, I did that. I own that. And you feel that way about it. Yikes.
yes.
And I see we have a hand up there. Let's see what get the conversation going. Fritz, yes.
Yeah, I wanted to share that I last Friday I had a situation where I used the I am sorry and at the same time followed by I will never do it again.
Oh,
Because
wow.
I believe that we're so used to there's an expectation that you want to hear I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So I use that and then followed with I will never do it again. So I think it
Right.
really reinforces that I am genuinely not wanting and will not do it again. So I had to use that this past Friday. So
That's
I
great.
highly recommend using both as compared to maybe choosing the one.
Thank you, Fritz. Thanks for sharing that. I think even just to have that thought and ask ourselves, does this mean I won't do it again, and see what comes from it?
I'm curious how the person responded after you said, I won't do it again. Were they surprised?
They were, well, he was, and then it literally stopped the conversation with him because he was really mad at me, and he did not expect me to come out and say it as I did,
Mm.
and I meant it, of course. And I for a minute there he was quiet, didn't know what to say. So I believe that he genuinely felt my apology and accepted it, and then shortly after that said, well, how's your family, Fritz? So I think that changes the nature of the conversation and his frustration.
Nice.
I,
Great.
I, I would tend to agree with that. I mean, I think that it's when someone says something like that, especially when it's surprising, it's can be unforgettable. I had a friend who said to me one time, Tara, you profess to be loving and joyful and open-minded, but in this particular arena, you're not. And I think I've told you this before, Kathryn, and her words just landed on me hard. And instead of being defensive, I thought for a minute and I said, you're right. And I am so sorry. And she was stunned. She was ready to argue, and it completely quieted her. And she'll tell you to this day, she's never forgotten that I've owned that. And I've truly tried to course correct.
Yeah, yeah. And that goes with your accountability statement earlier. So you take accountability for your actions, and you're responsible to correct whatever has been done. So own it.
Yeah. Thank you, Fritz. Thank you so much. I think that is so important to own it, but really, I think what we're also saying is only own your part. Don't own the whole thing. Don't own their feelings. Don't own, you can own your part and the impact that it had. And that's a can be a difficult line for me to walk sometimes because it takes confidence. You have to be sure of yourself. You have to be, anyway. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've got some other hands up, Michelle.
There we go. Hey.
Hey.
So my biggest I'm sorry is when I'm misunderstood and people take offense or they're angry. Just the other day, I was speaking with my daughter and she said, "Oh, that was so mean what you just said." And I said, "Wait a minute. I'm sorry. That wasn't my intention. Let's talk through this. That wasn't, oh, you thought I was commenting on the picture you sent. I hadn't even seen the picture when I was saying that."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm very direct.
Mm-hmm.
And as you were having this conversation, I was trying to think, why do people misunderstand me so much? And I think it's so much that they expect fluffy conversation from a woman, and I'm very direct like a man.
Hmm.
And I say things in a very direct and sometimes even terse manner,
Mm-hmm.
but without all the fluff, they take it in a way I don't intend. And when I say I'm sorry, a lot of the time they think I'm just backpedaling and
Mm-hmm.
not trying to clarify.
Mm-hmm.
They think that I did say that horrible thing, and there's no way that I can fix it and explain to them, no, you misunderstood my intent.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting too. It makes me wonder, knowing that about yourself and the impact that it has sometimes on people because of our
Mm-hmm.
culture or whatever, what can then you do take accountability for? Like, oh, I know this about myself, so I'm going to tell them I'm about to be really direct. I don't know, but it's interesting when we know and then we see it and it's like, is there a space to do something like that, like, do you
Well,
know what I mean? It's to set the tone, I guess, it's really interesting when that happens, when you feel that they don't really hear you and there's no curiosity on the other side.
mm-hmm.
So I
Well,
want
I
I want
can't
to say
change
something
who I
courageous.
am.
Tara has something courageous
You
to
know,
say.
You cannot
how do
change
I change
people.
who I am at
Oh,
the
no, no,
core?
no, no, no.
Well, what would you think about this, Michelle? Because here's I'm the person that studies words, so we have to keep that in mind. You express that oftentimes because you're blunt and terse, which really is an intent to be honest, which is a beautiful trait. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's what a lot of times where bluntness comes from, which is a very positive thing. But here's where I think you didn't fully take responsibility, if I may.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Rather than saying you misunderstood what I said, which puts a little bit the onus on them, is to take it all back and say, I'm sorry, I didn't communicate that clearly. It's a completely different conversation. So
And
that was my
I
take.
didn't say that correctly. Yeah, I say that wasn't my intent.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't what I meant to say.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. I love that. I think
But
that
people, how do I deal with it when people think I'm backpedaling?
Well, just like we just said, that's not on you. You can't control how they're going to
Yeah,
react to whatever you say. If you can get clear about how you've handled that situation, that's
yeah,
where your ownership stops.
yeah. But I'll definitely take that to heart, Tara, and watch how I respond.
it's super super nuanced. Like I've
Mm-hmm.
people learn in therapy not to say you made me feel, as opposed to saying when you do X, I feel.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's a little difference, but it lands differently. So yeah,
Well,
It
and I
does.
think
It
I
does.
think also taking accountability for our words and also the impact. That's not taking responsibility for how they felt about it, but taking responsibility for the impact it had.
Mm-hmm.
love
Right?
that.
I see that this had that impact. How can I take
Mm-hmm.
responsibility for that? Because it did. But that's
Mm-hmm.
different. That's where it does get stayed, nuanced because it's not taking responsibility for how they felt, how they reacted, whatever happened over there.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Michelle, for dancing with us.
Love
And thank you for Tara
that.
for being brave and vulnerable, both of you. It's awesome. Yeah. Got lots of conversation. Maria.
Greetings and good morning. Thank you so much for this conversation. And what I'm present to as we're talking about, I'm sorry, I really realize that I say, I'm sorry, will you please forgive me?
Hmm.
And they get a chance to say yes or no. And the juicy question that I love to ask, which puts me in a very vulnerable spot, is, so what's it been like for you with me being the way I've been being?
Ooh, I like that.
Ooh
Hmm.
la la, ooh la la. And I stop speaking, and sometimes there's silence for an extended period of time.
Hmm.
And then I'll just say, look, I really want to know. I'm not going to get upset. I'm not going to get angry. This is where I grow. I really want to know because, it's important to me that we do get along. And it's amazing what people will tell me. You have been so very difficult.
Wow.
And I'm like, say a little bit more about that. And I really just sit there and listen. And I'll go deep into it with them and ask them, look, let's forgive ourselves and each other on a really like radical level. Like, I give up the right to hold this against you ever again in thoughts, words, and actions for as long as I live and into infinity. Will you do that for yourself and for me? And I'll do that for myself and you. And it is mystical, magical, and amazing. And I have turned enemies into very close friends because
Wow.
of that. So, you know, I deeply appreciate the daily huddle. I've grown so much being on these calls. I can't always make it. And whenever I can, I am here. So I wanted to share that from my heart to everyone here today. And then there is one more thing. Oh, I do end it with, like Fritz said, you can count on me not to ever do that ever again. And then I'll either make a new promise or not. This is what you can count on me for. So that's really what I wanted to share. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Maria. That touched me deeply, actually. That because I think that is like you said, radical
Forgiveness.
radical forgiveness, and you said mystical magic. I can imagine because for someone to truly own it, that is really difficult for me. I'm not going to lie. To sit there and really listen to what the impact has been, truly hear it, not defend it inside my head or outside, and to really take that in and then make the commitment to make a change. That is powerful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Michelle,
Good morning. Good morning,
good
Daily
morning.
family. Thank you for that, Maria. That was very deep. I would like to have such a conversation with folks, but oftentimes when I would say things, okay, so say more, then I find, well, I'm talking with people who are closest to me, well, they go to, well, I don't know, and they just want to say what they say and then stop. They don't want to go deep into, well, tell me how that landed for you. Tell me how that impacts you. I don't know. That's just the way you are. And or forget about it. They get very dismissive. And then it's sort of, they say what they say and then they want to stop. Then they want to shut down. And then, so I'm not having the opportunity to go deeper with some people because it's just like they just want to
rant and then
or lash out.
and then be done.
Then shut, right. Then done, and they don't want to go. But I do have a question about saying apologizing and stating that I will not do that again. So a couple of days ago, I got into the car. I came down. My boyfriend was waiting for us to go to dinner. I got to the car, and as I got to the car, that's when he decided to move his backpack from where I would sit and then unlock the door. I got into the car and I said, why do you do that? Why do you wait till I get to the car and then open the door? You know I'm coming.
Mhm.
And he said to me, do not start when you come into the presence of someone, don't start with a complaint.
Mhm.
And he says it just sets the vibe off.
Okay.
He said you could simply said, when have the door open when I come downstairs or something. So I
Mhm.
could have made a request.
Mhm.
And I thought about it and I didn't respond right away. And I thought about it and I says, okay, my lesson in this is rather than be offended or explain my position, to take it like, okay, I just learned something. I just learned that I should make a request
Mhm.
rather than make an accusation or make a complaint.
Mhm.
So later on, I said, well, okay, I learned now that I should make a request rather than make a complaint. But this has always been his way. He does this all the time. And I never said anything about it, but there was a little irritation there. I mean, I didn't make a big deal about it because, and I get to the door, he'll open the door. But
Mhm.
I didn't think to say, I will. So by me saying I apologize, I will not do it again. Does that, by saying I will not do this again, does that convey that I acknowledge that I did something wrong and I learned the lesson so I won't repeat it? Is that the point of saying I won't do this again?
I think it can be, if that's the case for you, it can be. Yeah, I think it's saying that like this is not, I hear that this hurt you. That isn't something that I want to do. That wasn't my intention. I'm not going to do that again. So yeah, I think I'm guessing there are cases where it doesn't mean exactly that. Tara, what do you think?
Well, in some cases, it's an easy thing to say, wow, I'll never do that again. But in this particular case, that's a little bit like, I'm going to change my behavior overnight. So I think to promise that you would never do that again is a lot to promise.
Yeah.
And you also were founded in your wish. So I think in the moment, absolutely say, you're right. Not a way to lead the conversation. I'm really going to work on that. I'm sorry.
And
But
I
that
do think there is a, I
abandon
do
your
think that,
request.
yeah, I do think that there's sort of a gray area there in that it's like, I am gonna work on this. Because I agree, I don't want to make a statement that I'm never going to do that again if I can't fully commit to it, which many things it's hard to commit to. We're going to make mistakes and do things again. But if you're doing your absolute best and you'll pay attention and bring it to my attention next time I do it, I will hear you. Mhm.
One quick tip too, because again, I'm the words person. Next time you get into the car and the backpack there and the door's locked and he moves it, you could say, and not in the moment, but you could say, it would mean so much to me if you thought to move that backpack and have the door unlocked before I got out here. So that's a win for him. You just made it a win for him.
Well, this is the first time with the backpack situation. I think that's what actually made me say something, because now not only do I have to wait for you to unlock the door, now you have to move the back. But knowing him, he will have that door open every time from now on.
Oh, he's a
that's
keeper
sweet.
then.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
he will definitely not have me say this thing again. He will always have that door open from now on.
I think sometimes it's just coming with good intentions, and coming from a good place. Yeah. And sometimes these are just the ways to interact with people in the moment, So I think thank you for bringing that and bringing that vulnerability. It's beautiful.
Well, thank you for this powerful conversation. So important.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the little things, sometimes it's the big things.
Yeah.
I think we might have lost Geo.
I think we did.
But Maria, did you have one more thing?
Yes, I do have one more thing for you, Michelle, and for everyone. And it is an opportunity to say, I'm doing this because of workability. I really want things to work. I want us to get along. And instead of I did something wrong, I'm doing it so it works for us. And then you could actually take it to a whole nother level and have a conversation with, well, we could actually have a conversation and you can tell me regarding our friendship and relationship what works for you and what doesn't work, and really listen. And you'll be
Yeah.
amazed with what people will tell you. Well, it really doesn't work for me when you do such and such and such and such. And so I just wanted to put that in the mix because I know you like words so much, Tara.
Thank you. I love it. Workability.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Gio is back. I know we're just a minute over, but Gio, did you have something to share? We lost you for a minute.
Yeah, I lost signal for a minute. So I missed the last share. But I was present as you guys were sharing, and what a phenomenal conversation today. It was how really how it really involves a kind of, for the lack of a better term, emotional intelligence to discover for oneself, or at least discover for myself, the difference between an apology that allows for the opportunity of getting closer to with another, and an apology that creates dismissiveness with another. And so that kind of dance or artful way of apologizing does require a sense of maturity on my part.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed in my life, how I really constantly rather lean on apologizing. I have found that to be right about something that I'm right about makes no difference to our relationship. And so it's like, I like to say to myself, you can either be right or you can have love, but you can't have both.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to develop emotional intelligence or emotional maturity to give up being right. And I can apologize for, like Maria was pointing to, by taking responsibility for how I landed,
Mm-hmm.
whether I'm right or not.
Mm-hmm.
And that artful way of looking at the possibility of an apology allows me to get closer with someone. And so I was kind of present to all of that, but I'm not trying to say that I have mastered this art.
Yeah.
Sometimes I like being right, making you wrong. And so I try to, and I'm grateful to have Sorrel in my radar, because he reminds me every now and then, I'm not sure if you're trying to be right. And if you are, then, you could own that rather than,
be passive aggressive or
rather than, and I'm like, yeah, you know what, I'm right and you're wrong. And and that's the truth. That's what I'm going to hold on to. And so until it becomes a joke. So yeah, thank you for this phenomenal conversation.
Thank you, Gio. I love that. I just love just owning it, like all of it, just like we said. So if you do want to be right, that's fine too. Just own it instead of trying to get around it some way. It feels weird. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for being on with us for a little bit longer, and for this has been such a good conversation. I've taken a lot away from this today. Tara, what are your final words before we do our 7?
There are so many ways to clean up your words, but I think that thought here for me is attempt to do it.
Yeah, do your best. One of the 4 agreements. And we're going to end with love. Love yourself enough to forgive yourself and forgive others. Do your best. And laugh, even if that's your own jokes. Aloha, loudly or aloha. Give of your strengths, of your gifts. Throw that head back and laugh again, because you always have to laugh. Eat your plants, get your sleep, move that body, and come see us on the Daily Huddle to get your fill. We'll see y'all next time. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Everybody, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for a great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.